Okay, good evening, everyone. We are continuing in our journey through the Haggadah here, and we're going to highlight something that we left off on last night. Well, we left off because we didn't really get to that point in the Haggadah yet. We'll say something from where we left off last night, and then, as I mentioned yesterday, we need to start skipping around just a little bit in order to make sure that we can cover as much of the Haggadah as possible. So it says over the following, as we mentioned, that Yaakov and his sons, they ended up coming into Mitzrayim. They came down to Egypt. It was Anas al Pi Hadibur. It was against their will. Hashem runs the world, as we said. But the Haggadah, though, quotes the following. And it says, Bimsei Ma'at. They came down to the land of Egypt, Bimsei Ma'at, with just a few people. Like it says, B'shivim nefesh yordu aveisecha Mitzrayma. With 70 souls, our forefathers came down to Egypt. V'ata samcha Hashem lokecha k'choich ve'hashamayim l'roiv. And now Hashem, you have made them like the numerous stars that we have in the sky. So the Bali Musa asked the following question. If you look at the grammar of this pasuk, of this verse, the grammar is really off. Because if you want to say in Hebrew that there are 70 souls that came down to the land of Egypt, as we know that in the Hebrew grammar there is the singular and there's the plural. So if you wanted to say that there's 70 souls, plural, you should say Shivim Nefashos, there are 70 souls that came down to Egypt. However, the pasuk is quoting a verse in the Torah, and the verse says, "B'shivim nefesh yordu aveisecha Mitzrayma." With 70 nefesh, 70 soul, the Jewish people came down to Mitzrayim. So why does the verse over here say that it was 70 souls singular and not 70 souls plural? So the Bali Musa explained the following idea. And this is really the entire history of the Jewish people and the secret to our success over all the generations. The Jewish people, in fact, are not 70 different souls, and we are not millions of different people, and we are not spread out really across the entirety of the universe. In reality, Klal Yisrael is really Ki'ish Echad U'Belev Echad. We are one person, and we are one heart. We are Kol Yisrael Arevim Zel Hazeh. We are the insurers of each other. We're always watching out for one another. The secret of Klal Yisrael's success, how we survived one generation after the other, how we made it through Mitzrayim, how we made it through a destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, how we made it through an Auschwitz, the way in which we were able to stay connected, and the way that we were able to stay strong is because we are not nefashos, we are not many, many souls. We are really nefesh echad. We are one soul altogether. I was once by a special Sudas Haidah, which is a meal of gratitude that a survivor from the Holocaust was making. He had already survived the Holocaust. It had already been probably at that time maybe 50 years since he was set free from the concentration camps. And he said over stories from his time in the camps, the horror, all the difficulties that he went through. And he said a fascinating thing. He said, do you know how we survived? How can you survive when there's no food? How can you survive when there is beatings taking place? How do you survive when you are emaciated and you're freezing and it's frigid cold outside and you don't even have shoes on your feet? How do you survive? He said, you know how we survived? We survived on chesed. We survived on helping each other. We looked for ways while we were there in the concentration camps. How could we help another Jew survive another day? And he said, sometimes the measly portions of bread that we had, if we saw somebody was going to die from not eating, we each got together and we picked off a little piece of our bread and we gathered it all together and we gave it to that person who was suffering and he was almost in the throes of death. And then he would live another day. And he said, that's how we survived each and every day that we were there in the darkness of the concentration camps. Because when your life is for others, and you don't think about yourself, and you focus in on the needs and the desires of somebody else in this world, and you make it your mission in life to give to them, then you're not one nefesh and he's one nefesh, you're one person, he's one person. Adarabah, on the other hand, actually you are nefesh achas, you are one soul that is garnered together as one. And that's what Chazal, that's what the sages are teaching us. Really, the Torah itself is telling us over here that when Yaakov and his children and all of the whatever grandchildren were around at the time, when they came down into Egypt, so they came down into Egypt as a nefesh echad, as one soul, because we are all so interconnected with each other. And when the Jewish people are connected and they're not fighting and there's not division, as we see, the whole way that we got down to Egypt in the first place was because the brothers and Yosef, they didn't like Yosef and they got in a fight and they threw him into the pit and they sent him away. You can't send away your brother. You can't send away another Jew. The only way that we're able to survive and the way that we're able to be united is if in fact we truly are united ba'achdus, with unity. And I think it's remarkable if you look at the world today, and I know that the whole world is getting into achdus, into unity, because the whole world is in this together. But if you look at what the Jewish people are doing during this time in history, and you see all the organizations that have started since this coronavirus took over, and you'll see all the chesed, the acts of kindness that are going on each and every day for numerous hundreds and thousands of types of acts of kindness, which are being executed so beautifully under the circumstances which are very difficult. It's just a clear sign that the way that Klal Yisrael survives, and the way that we go through all of the difficulties, and the way that we end up finding the inner strength to overcome, is when we band together as one, and we rise to the occasion as a nefesh, as a soul, where we are interconnected with each other. Whether you're in Los Angeles, or in Baltimore, or in Eretz Yisrael, or you're in New York, it doesn't matter. All of Klal Yisrael, Arevim Zeh B'Zeh, we are all the guarantors for one another. And if a Jew in the Holocaust could survive throughout all of the horrors that he went through, merely because he made it his mission to do chesed each and every day, the best that he possibly could, so then how much more should we get involved in chasadim and acts of kindness to the best of our abilities? Whether it means shopping for somebody else who can't get out of the house, whether it means picking up the phone and calling someone that you know could use it to be cheered up. So many people that are out of work right now, they don't know what the future is going to bring, how they're going to pay all the bills for the up and coming Yom Tov, and then after that, call them, talk to them, let them know you care about them, let them know that you're thinking about them. Whether there's organizations that are projecting words of inspiration throughout the world, day in and day out, there are hundreds of shiurim, hundreds of classes going on Zoom. That's also a chesed. Everybody needs strength. Everybody needs encouragement. Everybody needs inspiration during these times. So in whichever way you could do chesed, whether it's with your money, whether it's with your body, whether it's with your words, whether it's with your listening ear that can listen to another person of what they're going through, whatever it is, says the Haggadah over here, you know what our strength was when we went down into Mitzrayim? We weren't 70 different people. We were Shivim Nefesh, we were one soul. And that's really the soul that continued throughout all the days that we were there in Mitzrayim. Yes, we got lost amongst the crowd. And yes, we became assimilated into Egyptian culture. But at the end of the day, as we're going to see hopefully tonight as well, Klal Yisrael stuck together. And by sticking together, that is our strength. And that is how we will be strong and how we'll be overcome the difficulties and the struggles of life. There's, I've been, usually before the Yom Tov comes, there's so many stories that I want to tell over, and all the shiurim throughout Yom Tov. We don't have these shiurim this year in shul, so I can share some of the stories already. But there's a beautiful ma'isa, a very beautiful story of a Hasidic Yid who survived the war. His name was Rabbi Ephraim Greenberg. And Rabbi Ephraim was known before the war as a very ehrlich, a very honest person. And his profession was that he was a jeweler, and he was a watchmaker, and he was a very skilled technician in fixing watches. And everybody would come from far and wide. He was very successful. He did well financially because everybody relied on Ephraim for his honesty and his integrity. If you brought him a watch and he would tell you what was wrong with it, that's what was wrong with it. He never charged you a single dime extra than it was. If you were buying jewelry from him, you know that you were getting the best deal, and it was authentic, it was quality, it was gold, it was silver, it was diamonds, whatever he was selling you, you knew that's what you were getting. And as a result, he had a very good reputation, and he was very successful. The war came, and it ripped him and his family apart. His wife and his children were taken one place, he was taken elsewhere, and he went through the horrors, I believe, of Bergen-Belsen, and he went through a very, very miserable existence, and only miraculously was he able to survive through the war. When the war was over, and he was in the DP camps, and he was trying to look for a way to start his life again, there was a group of people that were going to Sweden. And he decided that he himself was going to go there to Sweden. He's going to rehabilitate himself. There was a Jewish community that was building and had been built already. And maybe there he'd be able to start his life all over again. He got to Sweden, and he once again wanted to become a jeweler and get into the watchmaking business and fixing. And sure enough, lo and behold, miracle of miracles, his wife and his children survived the war, and they also ended up in Sweden, and they found each other. And he was rebuilding his life once again. But to get up his reputation, to be well known in that neighborhood, that people should bring them all of their jewelry and their watches for fixing, wasn't so easy. It took quite some time. One day, a very classically dressed woman walks into his store. She was not a Jewish woman, but she was from the affluent neighborhood over there in Sweden. And she said to him, I have a very expensive watch that's not working, and I'd like to know if you could fix it. So he looks at the watch, and it was a very expensive watch. And he said, I think that I could. She said, how much is it going to cost? He said, Miss, until I open up the watch, I won't know what's wrong with it. So I can't tell you how much it's going to cost. If you allow me to open it up, so then I'll take a look and I'll tell you what I think. So the woman, although she was very weary of this, because once he opened it up, he could tell her really whatever he wanted to, name his price, but she saw that there was a quality of honesty in him. And she said, okay, go ahead. He takes the watch, he opens it up, he looks inside of it, and he says, very small fixing, I can do it for a very small price. I can do it right now on the spot if you like. She said, well, thank you very much. And as they began speaking, she saw that this man was obviously a survivor from the Holocaust. And she tells him, I love the Jewish people. She said, Hitler, what he did to the world, to the Jewish people, irked me, it bothered me to no end. I love the Jewish people. I'll do anything that I can to help them. And I'm so glad that I'm giving you business and you're the one that is fixing my watch. As they're talking more, she sees that this man, Rabbi Ephraim, he has almost no teeth in his mouth. From all the malnutrition and all of the hardships and all the beatings that he went through, the Nazis knocked out almost everything that he had. However, the teeth that he did have left, they had all rotted and they were brown, and it was really, he was embarrassed to smile from what he had inside of his mouth. She looks at his teeth, she says, Ephraim, my husband is an expert dentist, and it would be our honor and our pleasure if we could give you a new set of teeth. She said, I'll call my husband, we could arrange a meeting, you could come in already, and he'll put a whole new set of teeth inside of you. It'll be my honor to be able to do that for you. And sure enough, they called up the husband, and he was more than happy to help. And next week, an appointment was made, and he went in, and at the end of a long medical procedure in his mouth, he was able to smile with happiness for the first time in his life since the war had begun, because he had a full set of teeth. And as they were talking, Ephraim and the wife and her husband, they were talking once again about how unfortunate the plight was of the Jewish people. And the wife said, so much do I love the Jewish people that I actually took 2 young girls in from the war who ended up escaping from Europe and came here, and they're almost like my daughters. And I want you to know that I love them so much, and they're such good girls. I'm actually planning on marrying them off to some of my family members who I think will be a perfect match. When Ephraim hears these words, he realizes she has Jewish girls that are in her house. They're being raised as non-Jews, and they're about to be wed off to non-Jewish men. And Ephraim, as grateful as he is to this woman and her husband for giving a beautiful smile, he says to the woman, "You have Jewish girls that are in your house?" She says, "Yes, I told you I love the Jewish people. I'll do anything that I can to make up all the terrible things that Hitler did." He said, "Do they realize that they're Jewish?" She said, "Well, they know where they come from, but they've been living by me already for so many years, so they're part of the family." So Ephraim, in a very tactful way, he said to the woman, "You know, they're really Jewish. And they probably don't even remember what it means to be a Jew anymore. And to marry into another faith would be such a tragedy when they could once again learn what it means to be part of our nation." And he said, if you really care about the Jewish people and you want to get Hitler back, the greatest victory is when we can continue to live as the Jewish nation. He said, "Miss, would you mind if I come to the house and meet them? Just to let them know that there's Jewish people that are left in the world and that we're thinking about them. Would you allow me to do that?" And although it was very hard for this woman because she was so attached to them, she saw his sincerity. And she said, "Okay, Ephraim, come tomorrow and you can meet them." And so the next day, he comes dressed in his Hasidic garb, his long coat. He already had his beard had grown back. His payas were there. He came with his hat. And he walks into the house. And when these 2 young Jewish girls who haven't seen another Jew already in years saw him, their eyes opened like this. They were shocked. And the first thing that came to his mind were the words, "Maida ani lefanecha," the words that we say when we wake up, when a Jew wakes up in the morning, and he says out those words, "Maida ani lefanecha melechai v'kayom." And suddenly these 2 girls break down. They start crying uncontrollably. They forgot what Hebrew sounded like, what a prayer was, what another Jew looked like. And this woman and her husband were watching in awe. And they were crying themselves at this very emotional moment. And they realized the best thing that they could do for these young ladies was to let Ephraim take them back to the Jewish community. And he told them, "I'll take them. There's a school for young girls like this. They'll go on to live a beautiful life." And sure enough, they did. And they ended up living a beautiful Jewish life. And they got married to fine Jewish men, and they raised families with generations and generations and generations already of Jewish boys and girls that are following in their footsteps. How does a Jew live? Not by ourselves. Not worried about our own finances and our own, how we're going to make a living and our own reputation. I hear about 2 Jewish girls. They need to know what it means to be a Jew. I have to go and teach them. I'll run. I'll even give up whatever I have to make sure that they have what they need. And that's Klal Yisrael, V'shivim Nefesh, 70 souls. The way in which they went down to Egypt is the way in which they came out of Egypt. They went down as one. K'ish echad u'belev echad. When they stood by Mount Sinai, it was K'ish echad belev echad. And when they left Mitzrayim, and they went through the splitting of the sea, and they traveled through the desert, and they finally came in the land of Israel, it was all Achdus. It was all as one. And that's the unification, and that's the strength that the Jewish people have for each other. Now, we're going to skip a little bit in the Haggadah. As we go through, we get to a very powerful moment in our recital of the Haggadah, which is really, as Rabbi writes, it's the turning point of everything. Because up until this point, it's a very grim story over here. And the picture is very bleak. Jewish people go to Mitzrayim, they go down, they become slaves, they get beaten, they get hurt, all the different things that are going to go on. And we are under the oppression of our enemies, and there's no place for us to turn. There's no place to go. It was already prophesied to Avraham Avinu that for 430 years we're going to be in Egypt, and now we're 210 years of back-breaking slavery, which was so bad and so harsh, it made up for the 430 years of slavery. So we're in a bad situation. So where's the story going to go? How now? This is the night that we celebrate. So this means that we have to have happiness, and we have to have joy, and we have to have our faith intact. How are we going to do this? So the Haggadah says, "Vanitzak el Hashem Elokei Aviseinu," and we cried out to Hashem, our Elokei, the God of our forefathers. Vayishma Hashem Eskolenu, Hashem heard our voice. V'yares Anyenu, and He saw our suffering, V'es Amalenu, and our burdens, V'es Lachatzenu, and our oppression. V'nitzak el Hashem, we cried out to Hashem. How do we know we cried out to Hashem? So the verse says, like it says, in those many days, the king of Egypt died. And the Jewish people let out a groan from all the hard work that they had. And they cried out, and their cries went up to Hashem from all the hard work. How do we know that Hashem heard us? Because the Torah tells us that there was one day after all of the backbreaking years and years of labor, where Paro, the wicked king, did not let up for a moment on us. He worked us and he worked us and he worked us. There was no respite. There was no break. Oh, you're making bricks? You'll make the bricks by yourself. The quote is going to stay the same. You're going to work harder and harder every single day. People were dying in the fields over there. That's how oppressive the work was. But one day, all of that stopped, came to a halt. Because Vayamas Melech Mitzrayim, the king of Egypt, Paro, he died. Now what happens when the king of a nation, of a country dies? Everybody knows. There's the flag hangs at half-mast. All of the stores shut down. There's nobody goes into work that day. The government is closed. And all of the slaves that were once under the jurisdiction of the taskmasters and all of the evil officers, they're off for the day. Because everybody's crying and everybody's at the funeral and everybody's seeing what's going to be with the future of this country. When the Jewish people had one day of respite, where Paro was not riding down on top of them all of the time, what was the immediate response of the Jewish people? Vanitzak, together, Klal Yisrael as one, we cried out to Hashem and we said, please Hashem, save us. Oy, help us. We can't go on like this anymore. It is so painful to be a slave under the jurisdiction of Paro. And when Hashem heard those cries, and it says, V'tal Shavasim Elokim, their cries traveled up in the air, into the gates of prayer. And Hashem heard them, Vayishma Hashem es Kalenu, He heard our voices. Like it says, Vayisker Elokim es Brisa shel Avraham es Yitzchak es Yaakov. And suddenly He remembered the covenant that He made with Avram and with Yitzchak and with Yaakov. But He forgot about it. Hashem doesn't forget. Hashem doesn't forget anything. So what does it mean that suddenly by Yiskar He remembered that He had a covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob? Oh, now, okay, fine, now I'll save the Jewish people. Hashem always remembered. And He always knew that we were the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And He always knew that we were this nation that He was shaping and He was forming in Egypt. And of one day, eventually, we're going to emerge from there as the Am HaNivcha, as the chosen people. He knew all of that. But the problem is that we forgot about that. We forgot what we are as a nation. We forgot what our power is and what our might is. We forgot to cry out to Hashem and to daven to Him. And therefore, when Hashem saw that we remembered, Vanitzak, and we cried out together as one, And we said, please, Hashem, help us. Oh, says God, you remember me? No, I remember you. I never forgot about you once. These 210 years that you're in slavery, don't think I turned my back on you. Don't think I wasn't watching. Don't think I wasn't involved every step of the way. And the Midrashim tell us that there were miracles upon miracles that took place, just like every survivor from the Holocaust will tell you that there were miracle after miracle, how we survived the war. No less, and even more, the Jewish people who were able to survive as a nation. Certainly there were miracles each and every single day that they were there. But we had to want, and we had to cry out. And again, this idea, together, vanitzak, as one. Because when Klal Yisrael is together as one, that is our strength, and that is our might. But there's something else that we have to keep in mind over here. The Mesilas Yesharim, the very famous Mussar work, Path of the Just, it makes a correlation between Paro and the Yetzer Hara and the evil inclination. And he says Paro really, just like the snake was in the Garden of Eden, was the manifestation of the Yetzer Hara, so too Paro himself was a manifestation of the Yetzer Hara. And whatever Paro did is a message to us of how the Yetzer Hara, how the evil inclination works on us. So what did Paro do? He was relentless on the Jewish people. He never let up a moment. He kept beating and working us day and night, night and day. There was not even barely a time to breathe, to catch our breath. Now, why did Paro do that? Because he knew, as the Torah tells us, the moment that the Jewish people will be able to congregate amongst themselves and have a little bit of introspection and time to think, what's going to be the response of the Jewish people? Immediately they're going to cry out and they're going to come back to Hashem, and then Hashem is going to save them. So he never wanted to give them a moment of respite to be able to have that. The Yetzer Hara does the same exact thing. He has a mission. His mission is, as the Pasuk and Chazal, the sages teaches, is the mission is to destroy us, to make us go bonkers in our head, to make us not have any time just to stop and to think and be introspective, and what is the meaning of life, and why am I here, and what does God want from me, and how can I become better, and how can I do better, and how can I improve myself? He doesn't want us to think like that. So he's constantly riding on us, one thing to the other, one activity to the other activity, one place to the next place, one thing on our phone to the next thing on our phone, one movie to another movie, one WhatsApp video to another one website to another website. They did a study that, we would think that in our generation, where we're so technologically savvy, that it would be much easier to write term papers or to write thesis papers. Not like when we were kids and we had to go to the library and you had to pull out the microfiche and you had to search for that article that you wanted to. You had to go through encyclopedias by hand and find the details that you needed. It took a lot of time. But eventually, by the end of 3, 4, 5, 6 hours or several days, you got the paper the way that you wanted to. So you would think that in our generation, we're much better. You go on to Google, you punch in the word that you want, it'll take you to a few sites that you need, and you'll get all the information that you need. So we should be able to write master papers, master theses, master doctorates, so on and so forth. Yet they found that the way that the mind works on the computer is, you go to one place, and as you're on that website, so as we know, there's always these pop-ups on the side over there. They catch your attention. So then you go and you click on that, and that takes you to another website, more information, and then there's more pop-ups over there, and then you click on that, and the next thing you know, 3 or 4 or 5 hours later, you're looking at your Word document for your paper, and the only thing that's on there is your name, because you have no information, because you got taken on a wild goose chase all around the world of the different places that Google took you. That's the Yetzer Hara in its finest. You have a goal, you have a job, you have a task you want to fulfill, and it just keeps taking you over here, do this, do that, and then you don't accomplish what you were set out to do. And the same thing is not just in the term paper, but that's the way that it works in our lives, that everybody has a mission. Everybody has goals that they have to fulfill, things that we have to achieve. But in order to do it, we got to stay on the course. We have to, the trajectory has to be straight ahead of us. And if it's not, and we keep getting turned this way and turned that way, and we go over here, and we move back a few steps, and then here, we're never going to succeed. The Yetzer Hara knows that if it lets up for a moment, what's a Jew going to do? So the language of the Mesilas Yesharim is Bekimat Kat. Almost instantaneously, a Jew will stop and they will think and they will realize what they have to do to become better and become greater and change the error of their ways, and then have to go in the right direction. Paro is the same exact thing. He is the embodiment of the Yetzer Hara. And therefore, there was no chance for the Jewish people to be let out of Egypt as long as he's riding on top of us all day long. But then, Vayamas Melech Mitzrayim, the king of Egypt, passed away, he died. At that moment, as he was afraid of all of his life as the king, if the Jews are left by themselves with no work, no backbreaking labor, no servitude, who knows what they could accomplish? The Torah tells us, you know what they could accomplish? Immediately they're going to cry out to Hashem. And at that point, at this point in the Haggadah, the entire Haggadah takes a new direction. It goes from slavery, servitude, being beaten, being entrenched in Egyptian society. When Nitzagel Hashem, we start crying out to Hashem, everything changes. And that's the beginning of the end, so to speak, of how the Jewish people are now going to be redeemed in the eyes of the Almighty. He's going to remember, not that he ever forgot, but he's going to, once that we remember, he will say, okay, now I can save you. Now I can rescue you. Everything starts moving very, very, very fast. The makkahs, the plagues come in. Hopefully, the next time that we learn together, we're going to go into the plagues a little bit. The plagues come in, and one after the other, he destroys Egypt, and he bolsters up our emunah, our faith. And then, before we know it, 10 months later, we're ready to go out of Mitzrayim. We're ready to become the nation that's going to follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the wilderness without any doubt, without any questions. All because in the one moment of truth, when we did not have Paro or the Yetzer Hara riding on top of us, we went back to ourselves of what we're supposed to be. And that is a nation that recognizes our strength is together, and our strength and our salvation comes from Hashem. When we do that, then we are the unstoppable nation. Nothing will be too daunting, and nothing will overcome us. And this is also, a person should know, at this point in the Haggadah, there is a special moment, an auspicious time, that just as the Jewish people davened in that moment for whatever it is that they needed, many people have the custom of pausing during this moment in the Haggadah and just taking time. You close your eyes, you don't have to look at everybody else, what they're doing, and you daven and you pray for whatever it is that you need. Who doesn't need things in the world today? Who doesn't need their tefillah, their prayers to be heard? Who doesn't need the miracles of yesteryear, like the Jewish people had, where Hashem literally took us out of Mitzrayim, with the outstretched arm from our enemies? Who doesn't need that? We're living in times, we literally need a miracle right now to rescue the world. Whether it's going to be that medicine that they think that they found, or whatever it will be, we need an open miracle right now to put the world back to where it was. What an auspicious time in history and in the Haggadah to daven at that point. We called out to Hashem, and everything turns around for the better. There are people that were childless all of their life for many, many years of marriage. And they davened during this time of the Haggadah, and lo and behold, the next year, 9 months later, they married to have a baby. There were people that didn't have parnasa, that had no livelihood. They couldn't get a job for years. They davened at this point in the Haggadah, and the next thing they know, after Pesach is over, they got themselves a job better than they ever imagined in their life. People who were sick, people that never didn't think there was going to be any healing for them. And they davened with all their might, with all their soul. They cried out tears. Like it says over there, they cried out and they groaned to Hashem. And the next thing you know, they go to the doctor, and whatever he thought was wrong, it clears up. It's an auspicious, miraculous time. And we have to take advantage of it, especially this year, So many people who need refuah, who need to be healed. So many people who need parnasa, who need jobs right now. So much unknown and uncertainty and angst that there is in the world, and a virus that just keeps filtering itself around all over the place, and it's not letting up. Rahman al-Islam, we need it to go away. We have so much that we have to daven for. And if perhaps we'll take advantage of this moment, whatever it is that we need, everybody knows what they need. Hashem will hear our prayers just as he heard the prayers of Klal Yisrael, and just as he listened to them. And that itself became the precursor for the entire Geula, the entire Exodus and the redemption. It'll be the precursor for our redemption as well, Be'ez Hashem. Okay, we'll stop here tonight. Tomorrow night, as I said, is a special Haggadah Shir between the Link Kollel, which is in the city in Pico Robertson, and Makor Chaim. And I'll send out the flyer and the link once again. You'll be able to hear a lot more insights into the Haggadah, just what you have heard from me. Rabbi Brander is a master at giving over beautiful insights, and Rabbi Heller, who is his son-in-law, also tremendous in his scholarship and the way that he teaches over. And between the three of us, God willing, we'll be able to entertain you for an hour and a half and give you something else to think about, perhaps that you didn't think about yet as we're approaching Pesach, and each one of us making our own Siddharim, some of us for the first times, as we know. And then we'll get back together on Thursday evening for our final Haggadah Shir. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Look forward to continuing our learning. And we should only know good things for ourselves, for our families, for all of Klal Yisrael, and for all of mankind. All the best.